Okay, fair enough. I think, can everybody see the TV okay? And can you hear me okay for that? Okay, I don't even have to wear it. It just sits here. It picks up really well. Okay, fair enough. So everybody, I'm Joe Caldwell. Just so you know a little bit about me, I was a paramedic, inner city, did 911 with Android IEMS for 10 years. I then did the medic to RN bridge about 6 years ago and worked in the ED for about 4 years as a nurse, and I've been doing the trauma educator spot for about a year and a half. So if it sounds like I'm making this up as I go along, it's because I'm kind of still making this up as I go along. But thank you very much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. This is Stop the Bleed course. Has anybody here heard of Stop the Bleed before? And those who were here yesterday don't count. Fair enough. Well, this was actually designed, I really like this course. It's one of the easiest courses I teach, but I feel like this is the most good I'm doing in the world, because I feel like this information really needs to get out there, and it's, I don't know, the most difference I'm trying to make. So this was actually designed post the Sandy Hook school shootings. They went in and found out, unfortunately, after looking at those poor children and teachers that passed away, they realized that almost all of them passed away from injuries that would have been preventable had somebody known how to do this very simple bleeding control. So that being said, it was designed for mass shootings, but it can honestly be used anywhere. Just so it was designed by the American College of Surgeons. There's all the fancy people. Just so you know, there are some gross pictures in this. I will warn people when they're coming. If you can't handle it, please cover your eyes. I'll let you know when they've passed. I did do this class about a week or two ago for IPS, and I had 2 teachers pass out. So I don't want any of that to happen here today. So I do give you fair warning. Cool? Okay, cool. Fair enough. So the number one preventable cause in trauma is bleeding, or the preventable cause of death in trauma is bleeding. It's the first thing we look for pre-hospital. It's the first thing we look for when they come to the hospital. It's even gotten to the point now that we're starting to give blood products pre-hospital, and we're starting to, if you come into the trauma bay, we no longer give you like the clear fluids, saline or lactator ringers, anything like that. We jump straight to giving you blood because that's what you've lost, that's what you need. So it's the number one preventable cause, and it's honestly one of the things that you guys, it's super easy to control once you know what you're doing. So if some of this feels intimidating, by the end of it, it should be fairly easy, and I will have, we'll have a session that you guys can come up and play with the toys and that kind of stuff afterwards. Cool? Okay, so where can this be used? As I said earlier, this was designed for mass shootings, but in all honesty, does anybody know where the average person gets cut the most? What location? Kitchen. Usually the kitchen, because that's where all your knives are. So yeah, most people, especially the average lay person, isn't going around stabbing or shooting somebody. It's usually in the kitchen where accidents happen. It's where you drop a glass, where you accidentally cut yourself, something like that. So this can be used anywhere. If you come across a car accident, if you come across a bicycle accident, you cut yourself in the kitchen, stuff like that. Yeah, the same information can be transposed to anything. So, with this, we're going to keep it simple. We're first going to show you how to identify life-threatening bleeding, and then we're going to show you how to stop it, be it using direct pressure, wound packing, or tourniquets. And we'll go over what works for what area of the body too. So, your safety. If you're thinking about it in the mass shooter sense, your safety is 100% the most important thing. Does anybody know how long the average mass shooter scenario lasts? Not Mr. Bum, I know he knows. It's usually 5 to 10 minutes. They're usually very, very quick. It's very, very quick, it's very, very short. What we want you to do, if you're in a situation with a mass shooter, we want you to barricade yourself in the room that you're in and find something to fight with. Don't go out there and try and stop them, that kind of stuff. That's the police job. We want to make you and the people around you as safe as possible. Barricade yourself in. If you see somebody out there in the hallway that gets shot, we don't want you going out there after them. If you go out there and you get shot too, are you making the situation better or worse? Worse, you're making more victims, right? So we want you to barricade yourself in, make sure that you're 100% safe, and get something to fight with. They found in these situations that a lot of the people, they know these people are crazy, they're not stupid. They know they have a very short period of time to do stuff, and they're not going to spend 20 minutes trying to open one locked door. They'll typically, if they come across a locked door, they'll just move on. So barricade yourself in, make sure you're safe. If you do have, like, let's say somebody shot out in the hallway and we saw the shooter go through the doors and we know those doors lock behind him and he cannot get access back to that hallway, then it's okay to go out and get them, make sure that you're 100% safe before you do it, and don't treat them out there. Drag them back to your safe zone, barricade yourself back in, and treat them once you get to a safe area. Does that make sense? So we don't want to cause more victims in these kind of situations. Any questions on this kind of stuff? Okay, cool. As far as your personal safety and exposure to blood, they used to think back in the 80s and 90s that any amount of exposure to blood and you're definitely going to get HIV or hepatitis, stuff like that. They've actually found that's not necessarily true anymore. If you do get exposed, if you do have something that you can use as a barrier or a plastic bag, something like that, that's fantastic. But I mean, how many people carry sterile gloves with them at all times? Oh, this is embarrassing for you. Yeah, he does now because I told him to. Yeah, so I keep a pack in my car. They're dirt cheap. I use them to check the oil more than I do anything else. But it's not a bad idea just to keep a first aid kit in your car, keep some in there. And the Stop the Bleed kits, which we'll show you here in a bit, they'll usually have some gloves in them. But that being said, if you do get exposed to blood, it's okay. They're finding that you have to actually have an open cut and you have to get a pretty decent exposure to actually get hepatitis or HIV. So if you do get exposed to blood, when the paramedics get there, explain to them, hey, I got blood on my hands. They'll tell you what to do. 99.9% of the time they'll tell you to wash their hands and you'll be okay. Has anybody here heard of the Ryan White Act? It's actually from a boy that got HIV or got AIDS here in the 80s. There's a big thing for him for the Children's Museum, actually. It was here in Indiana, but because of that, his advocacy, they passed a law basically saying that, like, let's say I get exposed to your blood, I don't need your permission to draw your blood and get it tested, and then I can so we don't need the victim's permission to draw their blood and get it tested and then treat me prophylactically for HIV, hepatitis, that kind of stuff. So don't worry about getting exposed. I don't want you to just let somebody bleed to death because you were afraid to touch them. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Any questions on blood exposure? Okay, so these are the Stop the Bleed kits. As I understand, you guys have a few. They're being put in with your first aid kits. They're usually, nowadays, you can find them with most AEDs. Does everybody know what an AED is? The defibrillator. So the things that you'll see in the hallways in schools, does that make more sense? Yeah, okay, yeah. You'll see them in with them. The problem with that is, where are most AEDs and defibrillators kept? It's usually in the hallways, right? Where's the shooters? Usually in the hallways, right? So what I usually tell schools and stuff to do is, like, yes, it's okay to keep them with them, but what we don't want you to do is be like, there's an active shooter, go to the hallway. We want you to barricade yourself in and be safe. So we typically recommend that you actually hide these throughout the facility. So that way you not only have one accessible there, but you also have one, hidden up at the pulpit, or we tell teachers to hide them in their desks, that kind of stuff throughout the schools. So they're a good thing to keep around, but also we don't want you to going to get one and make you a target, if that makes sense. The American College of Surgeons probably won't love me for telling you this, but I'm not here to make money, I'm here to help you guys. These kits have a tourniquet in it, they have a couple pairs of gloves, they have some gauze. You can buy these off the website. Honestly, you can make them by buying this stuff off Amazon and putting them together in plastic bags yourself. So whatever you want to do, I'd rather you guys have this stuff than buy the fancy stuff, if that makes sense. So most tourniquets you can get the cheap ones for $13 off Amazon. Most you can get Quick Clot at Amazon. You can get it at Walmart. It's not expensive. We'll go over all this stuff what all you need in just a minute. Any questions on that, on the kits though? Okay, cool. So with this, we'd like to keep it simple. First, there's 3 things we want you to do: ABCs. A, alert 911. B, look for bleeding. And C, control that bleeding using direct pressure, wound packing, tourniquets, that kind of stuff. So with alerting 911, who in here has a cell phone? Literally all of us, right? What we don't want you to do is we don't want to overwhelm the system. Does anybody here know where our actual dispatch system is here in the city? I know Mr. Bose does. Yeah, it's over off Washington State. It's one building. It's honestly about the size of this room. The left half's all police. The right half's all fire and EMS. What we don't want to do is overwhelm the system. We don't want to have everybody calling in all at once and then get 300 phone calls for one incident. So what we want you to do is put one person in charge of it. And I'm just picking on you because you're in the front row, by the way. You call 911, stay on the line with them, explain what's going on. That's all we really need is one person to notify them. Have that person stay on the phone with them. Also have that person be the person who knows how to get in and out of the building. I really don't know where anything is in this building. I probably wouldn't be the right person to call 911 on this. So have somebody that actually knows how to get in and out of the building. Do you guys remember the FedEx shooting that happened about 2 years ago? One of the biggest problems they had there was that it's a huge facility. It was giant. Just locating where the people were was part of the problem because it's such a big building. Does that make sense? If you do have, if it isn't a mass shooter event and somebody gets cut and they're bleeding, don't be afraid to go outside. The medics always kind of joke at the person who's waving their arms, flagging them in, but they're also very appreciative of that person. Don't be afraid to be that person. Again, only if it's safe for you to do that. So yeah, call 911, stay on the phone with them. Most of the people that work 911, they have medical training. They can talk you through stuff. I've literally heard them talk them through delivering a baby on the interstate. So stay on the phone with them, they'll talk you through the stuff. Any questions on calling 911? Are we all gonna do it? We're just gonna have one person do it, right? Okay, beautiful. Yeah, this stuff we covered. So with bleeding, and this is where the pictures are gonna start getting gross, by the way. With bleeding, this is not the time to be modest. You need to expose everywhere. You don't wanna be the person that like, oh, I found the gunshot here, but I missed the one that was here because I didn't want to take their pants down. You have to expose everywhere. I'm not saying leave them naked. You need to keep them warm, cover them back up. Cold and trauma, if you start getting cold when and you're bleeding, you have a harder time forming clots. So keep your patient warm, but expose everywhere, look everywhere. And we'll do, in the ambulance, we'll do literally a lift your shirt up, put your shirt down, open your pants, look around, feel around, check your hand for blood, that kind of stuff. So be very quick with it, but again, this is not the time for modesty. You gotta find the holes, or you're not gonna be able to plug them. If that makes sense. So yeah, you're gonna look for two different types. There's gonna be spurting, which means it's coming from the artery. This is under high pressure, somebody can bleed to death in 2 to 5 minutes from that. But there can be oozing, which can still bleed to death. It can be 8 to 10 minutes. So don't think just because there was, just because they're oozing, be like, oh, well, thank goodness it's not spurting, we're fine. It can still be really bad, so don't ignore that. Look for large volumes of blood. I can tell you carpets can hold a huge amount of blood. Does anybody know how much blood the human body probably has in it? It's like 200 gallons. That's a lot. 200 gallons. That's a lot of blood. No, it's 5 to 6 liters. So if you think of a 2 liter, it's like 2.5 of those. I have 5 liters. The Rock probably has 6. So depending on the body size and how big you are and how much you need. So that being said, like you could a spot this big in the carpet can hold half a liter of blood. That's a ton of blood, even though it doesn't look that way. So realize carpets can do it. I know it's freezing outside right now. Jackets, winter jackets can hold a lot before they'll really start to look like they're bloody. So just because you see just a little amount of blood, still realize it can be a lot more than you initially thought. Does that make sense? So you're gonna look for pooling, you're gonna look for spurting, you're gonna look for oozing. Yeah, this we've covered that there can be multiple places of bleeding. If there are and you're by yourself, you kind of have to decide which is worse and go at it that way. If you do have multiple people with you, you can have them assist you in talk them through how to do this stuff too. Okay? Yeah, this stuff we've already covered. Look for stuff that won't stop coming out of the wounds regardless of what you try and do. Look for pooling. Look for blood on the ground. Look for amputations. Does everybody know what an amputation is? Where the limb's cut completely off. Yeah, partial amputations bleed a lot more than total amputations, where the limb's mostly cut off but not completely. With partial amputations, the body thinks the limb's still there, so it keeps trying to feed blood to it. When it gets completely cut off, the body actually pulls the veins and arteries back into the muscle, and the muscle will spasm around them. They still bleed, and you can still bleed to death from them. It's just not quite as bad, if that makes sense. Okay, we ready for our first gross picture? All right, cover your eyes if you're not. Okay, here we go. So this is what I mean by spurting. You see how it's coming out here, and it keeps coming and coming and coming. But you can see how even though this isn't spurting, it still can cause a lot of blood loss. This is a broken radius or tib fib. It's just below the knee. Broken bones are razor sharp. I'll move past this so nobody passes out. But broken bones are razor sharp and can cut more as you have them. So you can see how with the spurting, it just keeps coming and coming. That's an artery. That will kill you very quickly, but with the oozing stuff, it can still kill you just as fast. Any questions on that kind of stuff? Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, all done. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, it's our re-verification cycle at the trauma hospital, so I have to prove that I do my work. My boss trusts me, but not that much. No, I'm just kidding. She's great. So with bleeding, there's 3 areas you're going to bleed to death from. The areas in blue, your arms and legs, are going to be the easiest to control. The areas here in green, it's the junctional areas. That's your groin, your armpits, and your neck. That's going to be a little bit harder to control. With the areas in blue, you can use direct pressure, you can use tourniquets, you can use wound packing. With the areas in green, again, that's the groin, the armpits, and the neck. That you need to pack the wound for, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. It's gross, but it works. Unfortunately, the areas in red, which is basically the trunk of the body, you need a trauma surgeon. There's not much you can do. Yeah. So, with the areas in blue, you can go to direct pressure. What I don't want you to do, so when you find the hole, I'll throw it down there. When you find the hole, you can put, just if you can get to where it's just a small area and you can get 2 fingers in there and use pressure that way, that's awesome. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Take whatever you have. I don't want you to get a giant clump like this and put pressure on it, because what's going to happen is it will just keep bleeding through. What I want you to do is take whatever you have. Do we all carry sterile gauze with us at all times? Well, this is embarrassing for you. You guys didn't come prepared at all. No, it's okay. Take whatever you have. A t-shirt, socks, a pullover sweater, whatever you have is fine. The first thing we're going to give them at the hospital is a massive dose of antibiotics. So don't worry about that. About infection. We can fight infection. You die in weeks from infection. You die in minutes from bleeding. We got to control what's happening immediately. Does that make sense? So what I want, now that being said, if you have the option between a clean rag and an oily rag, please use the clean rag. Take whatever you have. I want you to take a small amount of it, curl it up into a small ball, put it over the area that's bleeding, use the palm of your hands, use the meaty portion, and lean in. And then once you're here, you are stuck. You cannot let go. This is why it's important to call 911 first, because once you're here, you cannot let go. The reasoning is your body's rushing all of its clotting factors. Everything it's going to do to try and form that clot to stop the bleeding, it's rushing it to that area. And if you let go, it's just going to bleed out, and you're going to lose it. And your body only has so much of it. So once you're here, you are stuck. You stay here, you put your whole body weight on them, get them on the floor, use your body weight to your advantage, and then stay here. I can tell you 2 minutes of this will feel like a lifetime. But hopefully EMS is on their way, and hopefully you won't have to hold it for that long. Typically our EMS transports, usually once you call 911, they have 1 minute to mark responding. Usually they're on scene to get help to you in 6 to 8 minutes. So it's pretty quick, especially here. Your closest one is over at 39th and, 42nd and College. It's Medic 31. They're really close. They can be here in 5 minutes flat. The next one you have is going to be Medic 21. Is that right? Yeah, up off Keystone. 32. Oh, that's right, Broadroad's got 32 now. Yeah, that's right. So you will also get a fire apparatus coming too. They'll be here even faster. So don't worry about the time, but once you're here, you are stuck, and realize that the help is coming because you've called 911. So yeah, once you lean in, you just stay here. If it starts to bleed through that rag, it's okay to add a little bit more, but I don't want you to get a massive clump on there where it's just going to like bleed through this and you're not going to get actual pressure down to the wound. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions on direct pressure? Okay, again, this is for the areas that were in blue, your arms and legs. When you get to the areas that are, here's a little video of her just showing, so everybody can get a little bit better view of what I did. Again, she's taking a t-shirt. Stop the Bleed literally sells t-shirts that say this t-shirt can save your life, which I think is pretty cool. You see how she uses just a small portion of it? She's not using the whole t-shirt. And then once she puts pressure in, she is stuck. She does not let go. Cool. With wound packing, this is going to be for your deep wounds that are on your arms and legs, or your groin, your armpits, and your neck. These are the junctional areas. The problem is it just gets so deep you can't get enough pressure on it to actually get down to the wound. You can see here how if you just put pressure on top, it's going to keep bleeding from underneath. It's just going to keep bleeding upwards. Whereas here, if you actually shove the cloth down into the wound, then once you put pressure on that, it will disperse there. So what you got to do, this is my gunshot. Take I don't want you to take and just start shoving big stuff. Take a small corner of whatever you got and just start putting it in the wound. It's really gross. I can tell you from experience, it's really gross. Don't dig your finger down in there. That's weird and gross too. I don't know why you do it. But also with broken bones, we don't want you to cut your fingers. So this is going to be painful. It's going to be excruciatingly painful for the person you're doing it to, but this will save their life. Again, this is for the groin, the armpits, and the neck. Start shoving it in there. Once you get it full, and I can tell you from experience, there will come a time that it feels like the wound is full and you can't fit anything else in there. I want you to make a small ball, and then again, lean in with your pressure. And once you're here, you're stuck again. You cannot let go. So yeah, and you can see how much of this rag I got to fit in there. It can be a lot. We unfortunately had a police officer that was shot in the neck about 6 months ago, and his partner knew how to pack the wound, and that's 100% what saved his life, was the fact they know how to do that. So it works really, really well. Don't be afraid to use it. With this though, you can do, if you have quick clot, this is the military gauze. If you have this, use it first. As you see, it kind of unfolds out of the package like a magician pulling rags out of a sleeve. It works really well too. It's got kind of a, this doesn't have much anymore because I've been using it for training, but it's got a powder on it that when that powder gets wet, it kind of turns into a thick paste. If you have it, use it first and just kind of start shoving it in there. And then again, you will get to a point where it feels really, really full, and then make the ball and do pressure. Any questions on that? Again, it's gross. Well, at the end, I'll let you guys come up and play with the toys and we'll practice packing. Okay? Here's a little video of her showing just so you can get a better view. This again is the quick clot that she has. And as you can see, it kind of works just like a magician pulling the cloth out of a sleeve. As you see, she starts with just a little bit and just kind of starts shoving it in there. And then once she gets to where it's full, wait for it, wait for it. And then once it's full, she makes a small ball and goes into direct pressure and then leans her body weight in. Again, once you do this, you are stuck. This is again why you need to call 911 first. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So again, you can use direct pressure for the areas in blue. You need to use wound packing for the areas in green. That's your groin, your armpit, and your neck. And then unfortunately for the body, the main portion of the torso, you need a trauma surgeon. There's not much you can do pre-hospital. The problem with the areas in red is your belly's soft and it's meant to be squishy and move around. If I put pressure here, the bleeding's just gonna shift over. The areas with where your ribs are, the bleeding doesn't usually come out, it's usually gonna bleed inward. So there's not a whole lot you can do because the ribs are in the way. So yeah. So with tourniquets, has anybody ever seen tourniquets before? Okay, fair enough. These are called combat application tourniquets. These are the dirt cheap ones. They're like 13, 14 bucks. This is the ones we have on the ambulance. This is the one the police officers have. Although the ones the police officers have aren't bright orange because we're not trying to make targets on our police officers. And this is the ones that we use in the hospital. They work really, really well. They're meant so you can put them on yourself. Essentially what you need to do is you need to go between where the wound is and the heart is. So if I'm stabbed here or shot here, you gotta go between where the wound is and the heart. So go above it. The military teaches high and tight, where you just need to get as high as you can. That's perfectly fine. In all reality, you just need to go 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Never ever put them on the joints, the elbows or the knees, because the way the arteries work and the veins work, they go down underneath and you're not gonna get it tight enough to work. So above or below the elbows and the joints, between where the wound is and the heart. Does that make sense? Okay, when you put it on, the first pull, 90% of it is in this first initial pull right here. Pull as tight and hard as you can, and then latch it on the Velcro, okay? That's 90% of it. The next bit you do is you take this is called the windlass shaft, and you twist it, and you twist it till it won't twist anymore. I can get one more out of this, hang on. And it's really painful. And then you lock it in place. Once you lock it in place, go ahead and wrap this over it and then write the time down. So, my pain right now is probably about an 8 out of 10. I'm just not freaking out because I literally do this every day. But you can see, and I'll walk around, you can see how pale my hand is getting compared to that. And already difficult to do my other things. Like, I really think about my hand to get that. So, everybody sit back there. But yeah, you can see how pale my hand's getting already. My hand's already starting to tingle really bad. It's already starting to go to sleep. After about 15 minutes of this, my hand will turn completely purple and we'll go completely asleep. So let's guess, how long can you leave a tourniquet on for? Till the doctor takes it off is the correct answer. The unfortunate part is I'd rather you lose your arm than lose your life. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but you don't die from losing your arm, you die from bleeding to death. So once the tourniquet is on, it is on until the medics take it off. So, but give me a time frame. How long before it's actually going to cause damage to my arm? 30 minutes? Good? More. 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 You can have this thing on for 4 hours before we'll actually start to cause damage. You guys cool if I take this off? Thank you. But you can see, once I take it off, my hand instantly turns back to normal. Like, it works just like that. I'll have a little bruise here. Luckily, my tattoo will cover it. Nobody will notice. I did when this first happened. My wife at the time, when I first started this job, I came home with bruises on my arms, and she's like, "What are they doing to you at work?" It's not an abusive situation. I put this on myself. It's fine. Yeah, my hand will instantly turn back to normal. But yeah, you can have these on for 4 hours. In the hospital, they'll leave them on for 4 hours while they're doing the surgery. They used to teach what was called bleeding the tourniquet. We don't do that anymore. That was back in the 60s and 70s. Every 2 hours, they would let the tourniquet down, let you bleed for 10 minutes, and then tighten it back up. Turns out they were just letting you bleed to death for 10 minutes. So don't do that. Once the tourniquet's on, it's on. Does that make sense? And we'll have these up here for you guys to come play with in just a little bit. Okay? Never ever, when you're putting them on, oh, hang on. You ready for the next gross photo? Here it comes. Okay. This is what I mean by partial amputation. So, you can see how there's no way that direct pressure is going to work for this thing, right? There's no amount of pressure you can put on it that's actually going to stop that from bleeding. That's got to have a tourniquet. Does that make sense? So, put a tourniquet on, again, 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Here, and I'll go ahead and skip past it so nobody passes out. The first time I was like, it's a fluke, and then when the second teacher passed out, then I felt really bad. Let them know that they hurt. Tourniquets hurt, they hurt a lot. Once my hand turns purple and it goes to sleep, you won't feel it anymore. We've all had that where your arm falls asleep and you couldn't feel it for a few minutes. That's what it'll kind of feel like. If you're putting it on people's pants or over coats, it's okay to put it over clothing, that's perfectly fine, but please empty their pockets. Don't grind their keys into their leg just because you forgot to do that, or grind their cell phone into their leg because you forgot to take it out of their pocket. So empty their pockets. Again, never on the joints, never on the elbows or the knees, and I do have to say this, do not put tourniquets around people's necks. I'm required to say that. You will kill them. So yeah, that's a pretty solid rule. Let them know it hurts. I can tell you with a lot of this stuff, it's going to hurt. The person's going to be in pain. They will be in shock, so their adrenaline will be kicking in, and that will help a little bit. But this is going to hurt beyond that. You need to talk them through the pain. Let them know that you're saving them life. I can tell you from experience, if you act with authority and act like you know what you're doing, even if you don't, most of the time people will listen to you. So act with authority. Let them know that you're here to help them. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the combat application tourniquet. Here's a short video of them showing you how to put it on, just so you can get a little bit better view. Sorry, I forgot to silence my phone. So as you can see, they put it above the elbow. You can put it over clothing, that's perfectly fine. But again, if it's on their legs, please empty their pockets. 90% of it's this first pull. Pull as tight as you can, tight, tight, tight. And then once it latches on the Velcro, that's good enough, you can just drop it. Then twist this to the windlass shaft as tight as it'll go. And then latch it in place onto the plastic. And then they're just doing that to make it look fancy. You can, or that doesn't really matter. But the next thing to do is to wrap the thing over and denote the time. You need to let them know what time it was put on, so that way they know how long they have. If you bring somebody in the hospital, if the medics do or something like that, and they're shot twice in the chest and twice in the leg, and they have a tourniquet on the leg, they'll take them straight to surgery and leave that one on their leg until after they get done with surgery. Does that make sense? So the doctors, they need to know how much time they have to work with. So yeah, any questions on tourniquet application? Yes?
If you don't have the military grade tourniquet, what's the best kind of things to use?
Spoiler alert, it's like the next slide. No, I'm just kidding. No, great question. So with homemade tourniquets, the thing with them is they look cool in movies, They don't really work in real life. I would rather you go to direct pressure than spend 15 minutes trying to screw around and make a tourniquet that may or may not work. The problem with belts is when you get a belt tight, you have to pull it, and this is going to start getting tiring, and you're going to start loosening it. So I'd rather use direct pressure. Now, if it's me and you and your shot, and you have a belt, sure, I'll do direct pressure, you throw your belt on, that's awesome. But if it's just me and your shot, then I'm going to go to direct pressure. Does that make sense? So yeah, there's another person that had a question? Yes?
When would you use the tourniquet?
If you have it, use it. Don't be afraid of it. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is they wait too long to use a tourniquet, and then that person's bled out for 5 minutes while they were trying to make the decision. If you put a tourniquet on and it doesn't go tight, or you can't get it tight enough to stop the bleeding, it's okay to put a second tourniquet on, just either go above or below the first one. And it's okay to do direct pressure on top of the tourniquet. That's all okay. You're not going to hurt the patient any more than they've already been hurt. But fantastic question. Yes?
What if you don't have a
Just make a mental note when the paramedics get there, tell them. Yeah, and they'll write it down. I actually got in trouble once because I wrote it on the patient's forehead, and they weren't very happy with me, but everyone knew when they looked at him exactly what time it was put on. I didn't get in trouble by Andrew, but I did get a, like, come on, Joe, please don't do that again. But everyone knew exactly when the tourniquet was placed. With this, I'm not here to sell you tourniquets. That's why I had to, they have a thing to mention all the types of tourniquets. Buy whichever you want. This one's probably $50 and this one's $13. They do the same thing. And we throw them away when they're done. So you make whatever decision you want. I would recommend the cheap ones because they work perfectly fine. This is just showing where you can get them. You can get them off the Stop the Bleed site. You can get them off Amazon. You can get them at most sporting and hunting places have them. I think Walmart does have them in the hunting section. Yeah, they're not very expensive. If you buy them in bulk, they're even cheaper. So, some common mistakes is, again, waiting too long to put a tourniquet on, thinking that you can do it without it, not making the tourniquet tight enough or stopping the tightness because of the pain. Don't worry about that. Just go ahead, like, you got to talk them through the pain. It's got to happen. Loosening the tourniquet once it's on. Doctors are the only people that loosen them. We don't loosen them in the field. Once they're on, they're on. Remember, it does need to be between the wound and the heart. You'd be amazed the amount of run reports that I read where it says, tourniquet placed below the wound. Medics got there and fixed the tourniquet. So don't be afraid. Remember, it's got to be between the wound and the heart. Don't put them on the elbows of joints. Again, if one tourniquet's not doing a good enough job, it's okay to put a second tourniquet on. It's okay to use the tourniquet and direct pressure at the same time. But once you start direct pressure, you are stuck there. Does that make cool? Bleeding in children. So here's the unfortunate thing about kids, and nobody wants to see a kid get injured. It's every paramedic's worst run is an injured child. The unfortunate thing about kids is they don't decompensate the way that we do. If I were to get shot and I start bleeding, I'm going to first get pale, I'm going to get anxious, I'm going to get nauseous, I'm going to get lightheaded, I'm going to get altered, and then I'm going to go unconscious. With kids, they don't decompensate like that. They look perfectly fine, and then they die real fast. They decompensate real fast. So if you have any indication that a child is injured or that this could be bad, treat it as if it's life-threatening. Does that make sense? Because it could be the kid's just not showing you yet. So be aware that kids will look perfectly good, and then they will decompensate really, really quickly. The nice thing about kids, though, is all this that I taught you works the exact same on kids. You can do direct pressure, you can do wound packing, you can use tourniquets. If the tourniquet's too small, or if the kid's too small, the tourniquet won't get tight enough. When you go to do direct pressure and put your whole body weight on it, I guarantee it will work just as well as the tourniquet. The nice thing about kids is first off, they haven't been smoking for 30 years. They haven't been eating bad cheeseburgers for 30 years. They have good hearts. And their bones are mostly made of rubber. They haven't calcified the way that ours have. So realize that they can tolerate a little bit more, but they won't show you that they're getting sick. They'll look okay, and then they'll decompensate. Is that clear? Okay, any questions on kids? Okay, fair enough. Impaled objects, do we leave them in or take them out? Leave them in. Do not take them out. I had a run once when I was a paramedic, and this guy broke into another guy's house, and the guy that owned the house, like, saw him break in. It was one of those galley houses, you know what I mean, where it's all one straight pass. He saw the guy break in. He went in the kitchen, hid behind the door with a knife. When the guy walked through the kitchen, he took the knife and just buried it, like, right here. The guy then freaked out because he didn't mean to kill the guy. He just wanted to stop him from robbing him and pulled it out. And the guy said that when initially he was pink, warm, and dry, talking to him full sentences. When he pulled the knife out, the guy died almost instantly. It's because that knife was blocking off his artery, and when he pulled it out, he just bled. So the knife may be actually what's keeping the bleeding under control. So do not take it out. What you do need to do is you need to stabilize it. Keep it so it doesn't wiggle. So get some stuff, hold around both sides of it, and keep it so it stays in one spot. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Improvised tourniquets, we've already talked about that. Again, we've already talked about, I don't mean to say it to sound mean, I'd rather you lose your arm than lose your life. I'd rather you lose your leg than lose your life. So don't worry about loss of limb. We've already talked about pain. Does anybody have any other questions on anything? Okay, so to reiterate, first we're going to call 911. Is everybody here going to call 911? We're going to have one person do it, put them in charge of it, have it stay on the line. Should it be me who doesn't know where anything's at in this building? Have somebody who knows where things are in the building. Does that make sense? B, with bleeding, is this the time to be modest? No. Do we want to leave them naked though? No. Cover them up, keep them warm. Okay, beautiful. With direct pressure, where can we use that the most? What portions of the body? Yeah, arms and legs, beautiful. With packing, where do we need to use it? Yeah, the junctional, the groin, the armpits, and the neck. Beautiful. If you have a tourniquet, is it okay to just jump to a tourniquet? Yes. How long can they be on for?
4 hours.
Or until a doctor takes them off. Yeah, beautiful, fantastic. And then wait for help to arrive. Hopefully they're just a few minutes away. Any questions on anything? Fair enough. Well, let's come up and we can play around with stuff. I got tourniquets. I do recommend you put them on each other. Please don't go to the point where you're hurting each other. And I got 2 arms and legs. I got a stab wound here, and I got a gunshot here. Me and Andrew will help you guys pack the wounds and stuff. If you don't want to put tourniquets on each other, I do have fake arms. You can put them on here. Okay? So, come on up a little over here. Sounds good to me. You want to take? I'll do half, you do half? Oh, yeah, sorry. I guess I left all my toys in the way. I do have gauze here if you want some of that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I got more tourniquets here too. Our tourniquets are a little worn from all the time that we played with them, but they definitely still work. Yeah, and you can totally put it on me. Here, I'm going to turn this off and just set it over there.
Turn that a couple of times just to get the feel of it. Don't do it too tight. My arm. Yes. Perfect. Sure. Get it out of the way. It's covered up at the time. You should do that prior. Let's try it. Again. Yeah. The right time. Again, the biggest thing is To the left. Whole body. Yeah, and then just lean in with your body. Then push it up top. So you see how much you feel. You go like this, it's going to start. You're not. I'd like to say, never use this stuff again. What they'll do is they'll put that on if you need to tie your band. Just start at the beginning. Just push it. It takes a little bit. T-shirt, socks. It just depends on what cabin you're looking at in there. If you've got a single bullet hole and it's spurting, that way. When he says take off, when he says remove the clothes from it, if you got a bullet hole in here, it's got to go somewhere. There's always the third arm in that. There's always something. Always. Especially the leg.
Down to a science.
Make sure I can use my.
You know, one of those Cheryl, we actually already divided into 3 of these because I keep drawing.
Test, test. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for being here. Is this mic picking up the voice if I do this? Fantastic. Okay, so let's see here. This is a... Thank you for coming in. This is a packet of our liturgy duties here. How many of you have seen something that said like pre-Mass, what do you do, and then what are you doing during the Mass, and then after Mass in the usher room? Like there's a couple of those sheets in there. This is basically the same thing like that. There's not much different. So we're just going to kind of do a rundown, and it's just about everything that you've done in the past. So it's mostly just reminding everybody so we're all on the same page about that. Disclaimer. This is not all set in stone, 100% accurate. So there may be some things that you do differently. There may be some things that you're like, can we add this next time if you make another packet like this? That's fine. So don't feel like this is absolute and it needs to happen. Okay. So one of the things that yes, you want one?
I was tardy, so I'm in the back.
There you go. So what we've added here is just a baseline of ideas about emergency situations. And again, this is something that needs to be elaborated on. So right now we have a bare bones situation here with example for tornadoes and then fires and so on and so forth. So we'll go over that. But some general things to think about is you're all smart enough to have some good judgment about certain situations. A couple things that we want to make sure is if you need to call 911, you want to do it sooner rather than later. And we just heard that rather you make sure it's only one person and then have that person be communicating that they're calling, right? But you want it sooner rather than later so that the help comes sooner, right? And then, of course, Mass is going on oftentimes when these emergency situations can come up when you're ushering. So do the best you can to maybe try to alleviate the situation without disrupting the Mass. Sometimes it won't be possible to do that, and sometimes the priest will disrupt the Mass for you, so just kind of play that by ear. What do we do in a tornado? And this also brings up the question, what do you do in severe weather? Unless it's a tornado and you know for a fact the tornado is touching the ground nearby, don't worry about it. It'll pass, even if it's a severe thunderstorm and like lightning strikes something and then the power goes out for a few seconds. And the priest might say a joke about it or something of that nature, acknowledge that it happened, but then move on, right? So that we're going to be okay with that. But if a tornado is down, we have sirens that you might be able to hear through the walls, but it may, I don't know how many of you also have weather apps on your phones that also could give you like, hey, this is a chance that this could happen today, or there's a tornado possibility and things of that nature. So if you see all of a sudden there's a warning, it's something happening, our plan is to move people to the school, to Toohey Hall, and then go into the basement there. If you can't make it to the school or other options because there's out of room, you can go into bathrooms. You're looking for closed spaces with no windows. So bathrooms, confessional might be another option, things of that nature, and so on and so forth. Now, you may be asking, well, we don't have keys to the school. So we're working on that piece of it. We may, what we've been talking about is maybe getting some more, ushers more keys in box 1. So instead of just having a key to get around the church and into the office, you then have also a key to lock these doors, like an Allen, we use an Allen wrench for that. You have a key to get into the school, and then of course you have a key to get into the usher room and some other rooms into the church. And so you would have that all in one keychain, and it would still be in box 1, and you get the code monthly. See how that works? But stay tuned for that. We're working on that. Right now, it's just the same as it is. You only have that one key. Okay. Yes, question?
If that would happen, do we go to the Mass?
Yes.
Sirens go off. I mean,
Right.
honestly, I would be very nervous about we have big groups of turn
Right.
march all the way across the playground. That's going to take a lot of time. We have wheelchairs and stuff. I don't know, I would be very nervous about trying to get to the school. I'd almost rather just put her down.
That's right. So we have options in here, and of course, some people can make that walk and so on and so forth. So, and then of course the basement is a safer place. So that's where that plan comes from. But you're making a good point. People that may not be able to get there in time, or if the tornado is just too close by that you're not going to be able to make it outside safe enough. So we do the best that we can in that scenario. Hello. You do the best that you can in that scenario. That's where the bathrooms come in. You can fit some people in there, and then you also, confessionals here. And again, keeping in mind, try to stay away from places with windows. Try to stay away from And try, bathrooms are always the go-to. The church office can have some rooms too, so you can send people that way. And you got to do the best you can in some of those situations. And so that's again where the best judgment comes in. Yep.
I know I have on my phone travel too, weather radar. So like I told you, when my phone goes off in tornado warning, it may not be right here. And I make my church, do I go to my basement at home? Or I look at my radar, and I just look at pinpoint there. And I think that can make a big difference. I taught IPS for 26 years that dealt with kids in tornado warning, and it's scary.
Yep.
It's right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we're all humans too, so it's obviously nerve-wracking for us. Yes?
The area in Dewey Hall where the concession stand kitchen is, that's all covered by a precast concrete roof. That's going to be a sound that's going to the basement of the school.
That's another option too. So.
You can get a lot of people in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I helped out on the sports committee, we ended that way through Hall a couple of times. It was very easy to get everybody in that area. Because you don't know if you can get into the school proper, like you said, trying to get people escorted, but you can get in that area, you get a lot of people in that area, like that storeroom, garage door right next to the stage, it's all covered under precast concrete roof, so it's a sound.
You're not outside for very long.
Correct. Any questions about that piece of it, the tornadoes? Fires, we have 2 extinguishers, one there and one there. They're near the bathrooms is the idea. So you got one on each side over there in the vestibules back there. Right now we don't have, I don't believe we have fire alarms and sprinkler systems. So if it looks like a fire and smells like a fire, that's what you have to go with. And so that's kind of a situation where I would, in that case, maybe sometimes it might need a little extra investigation if you're not sure, but err on the side of caution with that. And then of course, if it is a fire, 911, somebody needs to call that to get the fire team over here. And then it's crowd control. So we have exit signs all over the place to show people where to get out from. And so do the best that you can to try to help people move calmly. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of nerve-wrackingness, but we don't want stampedes and people getting injured from stepping over each other either. So do the best that you can with that, and helping people see where the exits are, and maybe splitting up if need be, and so on and so forth. What about a suspicious individual? So when you're ushering, usually you're back there, right, where the sanctuary doors are. And so you're up in those stations, right? One of the things that we've been talking about is maybe every once in a while one of you peeks, especially if you're in the middle one, you peek through the windows through that door, and maybe outside, maybe go into the vestibule every once in a while, just checking to see if there's any suspicious individuals. You don't have to do this all the time at Mass, and we'll talk about, you're being a participant as well, so it doesn't have to be like every 5 minutes or so, but just every so often, just kind of take a look. What if somebody comes in and you're not sure? Generally, stuff like that where a person that you may not trust might do something to arouse your suspicion, but then just as quickly douse it. So they might just, make you comfortable. And so, and do something and participate in the Mass in such a way like, oh, okay, they're fine. So sometimes patience is the best answer there with that. But if it's not, there was a story where somebody came in and was panhandling with the church. And so what they were doing during the sermon, I believe, while people were sitting down, they were walking around and then getting up and then walking around and talking to people. And so what happened is we had one of our ushers take them to the vestibule and then talk to them and then have a conversation and so on and so forth. And it was okay and squared away. But stuff like that could happen. So in the case where that happens and you're nervous about that person, you can call 911 for help if you're feeling like there's a need to get some help involved with that. And then let's see, we want to try to get 2 ushers to deal with that person. And if you don't have 2 ushers or they're occupied, maybe just get a parishioner, perhaps a bigger parishioner to help alleviate some of that nervousness that can come with those situations. Any questions about the suspicious individual? Do the best you can not to disrupt Mass, and then sometimes the priest might have to say something about that. What about in a medical emergency? So say that somebody faints, or say that somebody's unconscious during the Mass or something of that nature. Again, the priest might say something of, is there a paramedic in the house? You might be the one to call 911, and so again, making sure only one person is doing that. We just had our stop the bleed situation. So say somebody hits their head and all of a sudden starts bleeding from a certain area or something like that, you may be able to handle that, but use your best judgment about what you know you can do, and then try to keep people away, especially with fainting and things of that nature. When you have like 20 people around the injured person, that doesn't help them, right? So maybe their parents, if they're a child, or some other close family members, and then somebody who maybe knows what they're doing from the health perspective, so a doctor or an EMT that's in the house. Let them be the ones to take control of that, okay? And usually, again, the priest might notice that, but sometimes the priest doesn't notice that, and there's some other people that might notice that. You may be the first ones, so you might have to direct that, but that oftentimes kind of happens organically. We've had that happen a few times, especially with the heating situation, right? So there's been some passing outs that happen, and so on and so forth. Any questions? And then some miscellaneous things. Paper towels and other miscellaneous items. We have a utility closet that's near the men's bathroom back there. Okay, so it's the door that doesn't say men's on it, and then that door usually is unlocked, so you can access that. So say that there's paper towels out in the bathroom or toilet paper out, and people need that. That's one thing that you can go in there for, and other items. And then we have an AED that's located in the vestibule. Now, I'm pretty sure it's locked, and it's not? You have to pull very firmly, so just keep that in mind. There is what looks like a keyhole, and it says that an alarm will go off. You just need to pull really hard. And so is there any questions about the AED usage about that? The rest of this is very much what you are all used to with the Mass. So you try to arrive 15 minutes before the Mass starts. You'll put on your usher name badge. Your usher name badge can be found in the usher room. If you don't have one specifically titled for you, you just put on general usher and general usher. That way people know who you are and can go to you for certain things. You'll then grab, right now we only have one usher key available, so if somebody needs to make sure that they get the key from box 1, I provide the code monthly. It changes month to month. That's still the same. You'll straighten and realign the narthex carpets. You're just trying to make things look nice. And then you set the lights to the pre-Mass setting. There's a big key back there to show you which one is the one that says before Mass and then which button to hit to change the lights for that. Then you'll open the 3 double doors. These double doors, they all lock in place. We actually have those 2 doors open right now, and they're open, right? So you'll open them up and lock them in place. We have our audio-visual units back there. You'll make sure that those are charging. And then you'll check the book in the usher room just in case you have a second collection, for example, or other special instructions for the day. Then after this is where the meat and potatoes of your pre-Mass duties is where you're greeting as many people as you can coming into the church. You have people that are set up at each of these sanctuary doors, and you're the front lines. You're the front lines of our welcoming party of people having a good experience here at Christ the King. So you want to greet them with a smile, you want to say hello to them, acknowledge them, and you'd be surprised at how many people would be then, oh man, this is going to be a great time today because somebody welcomed me with such a friendly face. Continuing that trend as you go throughout the Mass and administer to these people, and you do it to as many people as possible, right? So that's the theme there with greeting people and so on and so forth. If there's anybody that needs help getting seated, you see somebody coming in with a walker or a wheelchair, you just help them get to the pew they want, and then you take the walker and the wheelchair to the back of the church. That's still the same. And then when the Mass is over, you bring it back down so that they can leave properly. The hearing assistance, if anybody says, do we have anything for helping me hear? I'm not so good at hearing. You show them how there's a big sheet of paper back there giving you instructions about how to use those units. And then we're bringing up the gifts now, so you'll do the best you can to try to find 2 people to bring up the gifts at each Mass. Now, one of the common things is that we want to try to pick as many different people as possible, but what happens when you run into 5 people in a row that tell you, I don't want to bring up the gifts, because you're trying to be that good Samaritan and get as many people involved. Do the best you can with that. Sometimes you're going to go to your old stalwarts who have done it over and over again. We may bring the sign-up binder back. So there was that time before COVID hit where we try to have a sign-up binder similar to how we have it for adoration right now, but you just have it for each Mass, so we may bring that back. We'll see about that. And then the only other thing is you're just looking for any other open pew areas for 2, 3, 4 people for any of the late entries. Okay? Then the Mass begins. So when the lector comes up to the stand and starts to greet everybody, then you change the lights to the normal Mass setting. And then what you're doing is you're watching for last arrivals that come through the doors. This is where you might be peeking out a little bit, and those doors are opening up. Those doors are still open, so you're just kind of saying, okay, 2 people just came in, let me see, is there a pew there, right? So you're all very familiar with that, right? And then there might be some times where you have to ask people to move, because very oftentimes people like to sit on the ends but not the middle. So you might have to be, politely and with charity, but just, hey, can you move over, right? So you're okay to do that so that people can sit down. If there's any time where you have people that are leaving the sanctuary, you open the doors for them. By this point, when you're about to the first reading, you'll close the sanctuary doors, but if somebody's walking back to go to the bathroom or the cry room, you can open the door for them. Counting the number of attendees, usually if you're an usher on this far side, you count this section, and there's the middle one that counts this section, and so on and so forth. So you'll still try and do that. Now, why do we count the numbers? Say that we want to add a mass or we want to take away a mass. We can give the archdiocese rough numbers about about why we would need to drop or add a mass, what the numbers are like. Notice I said rough. You do not need to have an exact number here, and don't worry about that. Father Rob's got a great story that when he was at a parish, he would try and count heads, and then the ushers would try to count heads, and they would be frequently 8 to 10 people off from each other. So it's not that big of a deal if you're off a little bit, okay? Just a rough estimate is fine on that. While you're doing all these things and kind of surveying and paying attention to people that are up, you're also participants in the Mass yourself. So at that point, you're trying to also participate in the Mass. You're also good role models because you're more often regularly at Mass, but say you've got somebody that hasn't been at Mass for 6 months, it's like, what do I do now? Oh, I stand up, I sing, and you're great role models for that. So they might look around and see what you're doing and like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing now. When the offering basket comes around, what you're looking for is the prayers, the petitions to come up, and then one person, usually it's this far person over on the side, is walking back down this side aisle, through this door, through the sacristy to get back into the chapel. We're still doing that. This is a good time to count the heads in the chapel too, so count the people in the chapel as well, as you're collecting back there for the collection during offertory. And then, of course, once the song starts, the preparative gifts song starts, you're all doing the main church area by that point. So you'll be walking down at the front of the pews and handing baskets. A good rule of thumb is that if a person all of a sudden is taking like maybe 5-10 seconds and you're noticing that might be fine. But you're venturing into that area where, okay, they might just you might just tell them, hey, after Mass, or why don't you come up later if you have to write a check right now and you're trying, I want to donate, so. Try to keep the basket moving is the key there. And then after you get all the money back, you have somebody taking charge of getting all of that money pooled together, and then you have a second person to also be there helping out with that. 2 people should always be taking the money back to the office area and then turning to the right in that workroom immediately as you enter in there. There's that safe with the appropriate bag. So you put the money in the appropriate bag and then drop that in the safe. You should always have 2 people, and do the best you can with trying to have at least 1 adult there. I know we have some teens here, then you guys are the teen usher group, so sometimes that doesn't happen. But if you could, try to have 1 adult in there. We don't want anybody to be assumed for fraud or anything like that. We don't want any of you to be in danger or be suspicious of that, okay? Then there's a note here about gluten-free hosts. So this is where now we're talking about communion. And just in case somebody comes up to you and says, hey, is there any way that we have gluten-free hosts at this church? The answer is yes, it's the priest line. So what you'll do is you'll direct the person to the priest line during communion. You'll say, okay, they line up on this side in this section. So if they're not going to sit there, that's fine, but at least get them there. And even if they don't do that, or they just forget, if they ask the Eucharistic ministers can direct them to Father, or they can handle the situation. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. But the main answer is send them down to the priest line, and the priest will handle that. Then the next thing you're thinking about is when the priest sits down, whoever's got control of the lights back there sets it to meditation. And the only time you don't do this is if you have a choir back there or another music group back there and they're still singing or doing some piece. Then leave the lights on during this time so that they can see. If there's a second collection that day, as the lights are dim, this is the time to then bring the baskets then down again for a second collection, repeating very much the same way that you did for offertory. And then again, you're trying to get 2 people back to take the money back and put it in the appropriate bag and then into the safe. Then what your next thing is you're waiting for the closing hymn to be announced or start, and that's when you reopen these sanctuary doors for people, prop them open. If there's a walker, you're starting to take that down to the person that needed it. Wheelchair is another, or whatever the case would be, the assistance things. You're taking that to the person. And then this kind of bleeds into after Mass. You're setting that walker to the person that needs it. You're also passing out bulletins at your stations, and just in the same way that you were greeting people, you're welcoming them. You're welcoming them. You're bidding them a goodbye in the same fashion, where you're with a smile, and again trying to betroth a hospitable experience, a good experience for them as they walk out, as well as they come in. After most people have left, then you're just walking up and down the aisles to see if there's any loose belongings. So most of it is bulletins, right? Sometimes people just leave bulletins in there, or books are kind of left all over the place, and you can straighten that up. Right now we have these chant mass and other information on the sides of the pews. So if there's all kinds of stuff on the floor and things of that nature, do the best you can with surveying pews and just trying to pick some of that stuff up and making it look a little nicer. Bulletins get discarded. If there's an item of value that's left, like a purse or some piece of jewelry, things of that nature, just take it back to the office and then put a note as to what Mass that was left at. And then we'll take care of it from there. The office people will take care of it. Then, by this point, just about everybody should be done. So you close the sanctuary doors, and then you return your usher key to box 1, and you're done. Any questions?
Are the ushers supposed to help at communion time with people going to communion?
We haven't done that. We haven't done that in the past. And I think that what was talked about is that most people know enough about, okay, what we do is the front. In the future, we may add that, but right now, don't worry about that. Any other questions? Thanks everybody for being here for the time. So, thank you. These packets are yours. Who is new? Is there anybody that came in that's new today? Come on up to me and we'll talk. And then we just get you into the system because now you're trained as ushers, so you know everything there is to know, and so you can be ushers now whenever you want. Thanks everyone.